All right, what's up, everybody? It is a live emergency episode of Candlestick Chronicles because Deebo Samuel is no longer a member of the San Francisco 49ers. Ian Rappaport, who's had an eventful week in Indianapolis, if you haven't been paying attention to the news, but Ian Rappaport was the first to report on Saturday afternoon around 4 o'clock that Deebo Samuel is going to the Washington Commanders and the 49ers are recouping a fifth round pick. Um, so I'm Chris Biederman. My co-host Kyle Madsen was unavailable to pod right now. So I am going to talk about this a little bit on my own, and we'll talk about it together later in the week. But my immediate reaction to the 49ers trading Deebo Samuel is that um, I think it's overall a pretty positive development. I was of the mind that there might not be a super robust trade market for Deebo Samuel because when teams know that one another team is going to move on from a player, they would typically wait for that player just to get released before offering a draft pick for him or draft pick compensation for him. So for the 49ers to get a fifth round pick, I think is a relatively good deal for them, particularly given Deebo Samuel's lack of production last year. And I'm kind of the mind that as good as Deebo Samuel was in 2021, Bill Walsh did this, Bill Belichick's done this. Like it's probably better in the long run to get rid of a player maybe a year too early than a year too late. And even in this case, I think you could make an argument that it might be a year too late for the 49ers in terms of moving on from Deebo Samuel. Um, I just don't think the way he played on top of the way he took care of himself led to him having much longevity in terms of the style he played, right? Like Deebo Samuel could, maybe this offseason Deebo Samuel loses a bunch of weight and evolves the way he plays and becomes more of a route runner and becomes better against man-to-man coverage, and isn't just sort of this gadget player who you run bubble screens to or who you give running plays to out of the backfield. Um, if he were to do that, then yeah, it would make sense. But I think Deebo does need to evolve and change his game dramatically if he's going to be a productive player going forward. And with the 49ers, them needing to get younger, John Lynch talking at the combine this week about the team's need to get younger. I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense. And I think, look, this gives Ricky Pearsall a little bit more room to get reps and develop. The 49ers obviously know what they have in Jawan Jennings, Brandon Ayuk coming off the injury. They still have guys there. Ayuk is I would say a pretty decent sized question mark at this point. But this opens up an avenue for the 49ers to dramatically reshape their receiver room. And I think Debo is one of one. And I say that because I don't think the 49ers are going to try to find another Debo type receiver, right? I think that's kind of been tried in the NFL for years now, really since 2019. You remember after the 49ers went to the Super Bowl in Debo's rookie season, that following draft, there was so much talk of, who's the next Deebo Samuel? How are these teams going to find the next Deebo Samuel and play, this version that the 49ers are playing of positionless football? Um, I don't think the 49ers are really going to go down that route. I think Kyle Shanahan has decided, and you can tell with Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall and Brandon Ayuk, those are all route runners. Those are all guys who can separate and win on third down and man-to-man coverage in big moments. I think that's what Kyle Shanahan's really going to prioritize. And yeah, if they can get a receiver who's really good with the ball in his hands, sure, they'll take a shot, I think, but I don't think that's going to be a priority. I don't think they're going to consciously say, okay, we got rid of Deebo, now we need to find a new Deebo. I think they just need to find a receiver in free agency and also in the draft. So um, the 49ers, from a salary cap perspective, I don't think that they're going to eat 31 million in dead money. Um, it looks like by doing this deal before June 1st I presume the draft pick, the 5th round draft pick, is for this year's draft. So that would give the 49ers 11 picks. Um, and the void money is accelerated, and this is courtesy of our friend Nick Wagner from ESPN, who has this written in his story, that I believe is publishing any second now if it hasn't already published. But it's going to be 31 million in dead money in 2025. No cap savings for this year. Um, it's not ideal, right? It's not ideal to move off of a player who's, I think, he's going to count $21 million against the salary cap for Washington. It's not ideal to not get any cap savings, but I think there's a case that could be made that it's addition by subtraction, right? If you're the 49ers and you're looking at the 2025 season and you're saying, yeah, we probably need to figure out a way to get more people involved. So you're not so reliant on Deebo Samuel, who really only had, it felt like that Miami game late in the season was really the only like truly dominant game he had, or at least in the second half of the season. Deebo just left a lot wanting. He was not breaking tackles. He didn't seem like he was in shape. He was dealing with injuries. Um, and if they would have kept him, I think it would have been tough to have him on the field while also trying to move away from him in terms of, getting him all the touches. Like if Deebo Samuel's on your team, you got to give him 6 to 10 touches a game. You just have to. And I don't think Deebo would have been happy with a diminished role, and I don't think it would have made sense for the 49ers to be paying Deebo Samuel $21 million to have a diminished role and then have him be unhappy. So I think this makes sense for both sides. Deebo gets to go to Washington where he'll be with Jaden Daniels. That could be really interesting, playing opposite Terry McLaurin. I think that's a good pairing. I know a lot of people have mentioned that. Those two complement each other really well. Deebo is believe he's from South Carolina, so he'll obviously be much closer to home than he was out in San Francisco or Santa Clara specifically. So I think it makes sense. I really do. I think there's a potential to be, addition by subtraction. For the 49ers, and I'm just going to pull up Deebo Samuel's Pro Football Reference page here just to kind of illustrate what the numbers say about his decline. Like obviously what Deebo Samuel did in 2021 was unbelievable. He 1,770 yards from scrimmage, first team All Pro, 14 touchdowns, basically carried the 49ers to the NFC Championship game that year. Jimmy Garoppolo as the quarterback. Just Deebo Samuel looked like a Hall of Famer that year. And I said it a bunch of times as it was happening. I was covering the team then for the B. And it was unique how good he was. He was, the 49ers dealt with a ton of injuries at running back that year. Elijah Mitchell was hurt early. I believe Raheem Mostert was still on the team and was kind of in and out of the lineup. They needed Deebo Samuel to be a running back for them, and he was. And he had where's his rushing totals? He had 365 rushing yards on 59 carries. He had 8 rushing touchdowns. That is a wild number. He had 6 receiving touchdowns and 8 rushing touchdowns. Just a completely wild number. The yards after the catch numbers were crazy. The broken tackles were crazy. He was just he was just one of the most unique players I can remember, and that year looked like a Hall of Fame type player. The issue is it didn't really continue. He only played in 13 games in 2022, only had 5 touchdowns, 864 yards. Next season, 2023, he was back after, Deebo, I think after 2022 talked about how bad of a year he had. And in 2022, you remember that's when the offseason happened, the contract stuff. I had heard that, Deebo Samuel was out and about and telling everybody that he wanted to play for the Dallas Cowboys. And he was not at that point. You remember the 49ers were trying to integrate Trey Lance as their starting quarterback. Deebo did not have a high opinion of Trey Lance, is what I heard. And it was just a tumultuous offseason for Deebo before he got that new contract. And then in 2023, after Brock Purdy had established himself, Deebo Samuel bounced back, 60 catches, 892 yards receiving, 7 touchdowns. He had another 5 rushing touchdowns, 225 yards. So 12 total touchdowns in the regular season. I forget the stat exactly, but the 49ers had, I believe it was 40 touchdowns between Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, and Brandon Ayuk that season. And obviously they went to the Super Bowl. And this last year, none from McCaffrey, none from Ayuk, and 4 from Deebo. Their top 3 touchdown scorers from 2023 had 40, and then they had 4 in 2024. And I think that goes a long way towards explaining the 49ers decline from Super Bowl loser to 6-11 and well out of the playoff chase. But look, when you're a team that is trying to keep its championship window open, and you have to reimagine the roster, you have to make some of these changes, you have to get younger at a certain point. Windows don't stay open forever. Um, this is I think the 49ers hope this is Ricky Pearsall's opportunity. And I think they view Ricky Pearsall's rookie season as a wash. Obviously, we came into camp. He had the shoulder injury that prohibited him from practicing. Then one of the craziest stories that I can remember, Ricky Pearsall gets shot. I think it was August 31st. And he still comes back and is still able to play and still showed signs of being a potentially valuable player to the 49ers. He's far from established, right? Like, I don't think the 49ers, I don't think it's lost on them that they don't know what they have in Ricky Pearsall. Like, I don't think they're just sitting there saying, "Oh yeah, Ricky Pearsall, he's going to be a 1,200-yard guy. He's going to score 8 touchdowns for us. He's going to catch 80 balls." Like, I don't think that's what they think. I think they're hopeful, and I think they believe in the talent that Ricky Pearsall has, but I don't think they're banking on him to replace Deebo Samuel. And one thing that stood out about what John Lynch said, I forget if it was on Mayoko's podcast or if it was at the podium at the combine, but he said in regards to the receiver position that the 49ers have a lot of work to do. And I think they do. I expect them to add a veteran or two in free agency, and I expect them to add a receiver or two in the draft. And look, Kyle Shanahan scouts receivers more closely than any position, maybe outside of quarterback. And Josh Williams, who is, I guess second in command now when it comes to the personnel department, he interviewed for the Jacksonville Jaguars GM job. But Josh Williams, a former receiver himself, he played receiver at Columbia. He's the right hand man for Kyle Shanahan when it comes to receivers. And Josh Williams, drafted Deebo Samuel, kind of put Josh on the map a little bit in the scouting community. Josh turns around and scouts Brandon Ayuk, and that was, not an immediate success because Brandon Ayuk didn't have the best rookie season, but in the long haul, the Brandon Ayuk pick, I think, has worked out, injury aside from last year. So now Josh Williams, who is in the GM mix around the league, I think he'll be getting interviews next year in the GM cycle, and I think he's also a candidate if and when John Lynch steps away. Josh would be a candidate to step into that role. But I provide this context because Josh now has a very interesting job in terms of, helping Kyle Shanahan find the next receiver or multiple receivers and remake the receiving core around Ricky Pearsall and Jawan Jennings and Brandon Ayuk. We don't know when Brandon Ayuk is going to be ready. It's ACL injuries are typically a year, can sometimes be 7 or 8 months, but we know there were other things. There were other tendons, ligaments, whatever that in Brandon Ayuk's knee that he needs to recover from, that he injured, that could prolong his comeback. So we don't know when he's going to come back. There might be clarity within the next few weeks or months in terms of his prognosis, but you're looking at a scenario now where your top 2 healthy receivers on the 49ers roster are Jawan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall. And so Josh Williams, 49ers top receiver scout, has his work cut out for him. So it'll be interesting to see what the 49ers do. Overall, I think getting a 5th round pick is a pretty solid haul. We know the 49ers have had a lot of success in the 5th round when you talk about George Kittle, Trey Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga, Diamador Lenore was a 5th round pick. So I'm not saying that they've hit on all of them because there have been some misses, but the 49ers like round 5 for whatever reason. And that, if they turn this Deebo Samuel pick into a starter and potentially a high level starter, that's good business for them. That's a big win for them. And getting a draft pick overall, I think is good business for them because I was kind of expecting the 49ers to just release Deebo, not get any draft pick compensation back. So I think this is ultimately a positive development for them because it was time to move on from Deebo, and that's what Deebo Samuel wanted was a chance to play somewhere else. Now, there will be discussion about the $31 million the 49ers are taking in dead cap. If Deebo Samuel was on the team, he was getting 30 that he was counting $31 million against the cap. If he was, or 21 plus, the next season of the contract. I tend to think that dead cap money, in terms of the impact, talking about it as like this hugely detrimental thing. It's like they would have been paying that money had Deebo Samuel been on the roster or not. That's a sunk cost. So I don't think you can look at it like, oh, there's so much dead money, you just got to keep this guy around. It's like, no, you just take the dead cap hit, and I think you can actually make a good case that it's smart that they took the entire dead cap hit in 2025 because it's not going to linger on, right? You remember, D Ford, they restructured his contract. They ended up pushing money down the road, and they had dead cap money from D Ford for years and years and years. It's not ideal to have $31 million in dead cap money from this Deebo Samuel trade, but it rips a Band-Aid off. You ultimately don't have any lingering dead money in 2026 and 2027. And it works in part because, assuming you sign Brock Purdy to a new contract, you take on the Deebo Samuel dead cap hit while Brock Purdy's cap number is small. And yeah, the average annual value of Brock Purdy's contract might be $55 million or whatever. But I guarantee you the cap hit in 2025, if and when, assuming they come to that agreement on that deal, the cap hit for Brock Purdy is probably going to be like 8 to 12 million bucks, and then escalate. And then, 3 years from now, I'll be like 65 or 70 million, something ridiculous. But the cap's going up. So with the salary cap going up, I think the 31 million is palatable. I think it's smart to just take it all this year while Brock Purdy's cap number is going to be small. And then when you get into next season and beyond, you don't have lingering dead money from Deebo Samuel's contract. So ultimately, it's not ideal, but these things run its course. I think ultimately, again, addition by subtraction. You're not going to have Deebo Samuel tweeting, during the week that he's not getting enough touches and telling people he's unhappy and showing up to camp out of shape and all of that. And I'm not saying Deebo Samuel's not going to be good for Washington, because maybe he is. Maybe he will bust his ass this offseason. Maybe he'll come in phenomenal shape. Maybe he'll avoid injuries next year. And he will be a version of the 2021 player. And maybe that comes back to bite the 49ers, because Washington, again, a team that just went to the NFC Championship game, 49ers make the playoffs, maybe they end up playing Washington. And then you have a very interesting scenario in which Deebo Samuel is playing against the 49ers. Who knows? But ultimately, I think it's good business. Sometimes you just got to move on from declining players. The 49ers absolutely have to get younger and cheaper. And I think Deebo Samuel is a prime candidate to move off the roster in order to try getting younger and cheaper. And again, this gives oxygen to Ricky Pearsall's development, potentially a rookie receiver's development. It allows Juwan Jennings to continue to have a big role. And ultimately, even if you don't add a receiver who's going to contribute this year, when Brandon Ayuk comes back, and knock on wood, Brandon Ayuk comes back healthy, Brandon Ayuk, Juwan Jennings, and Ricky Pearsall, I think could potentially be good enough to get to where you want to go. But again, I do think the 49ers will add a free agent at receiver, somebody probably within the $5 to $10 million range. Nothing insane. Like they're not going to go get T. Higgins. They're not going to go get, I don't know. I like Kyle and I talked about like Elijah Moore, Van Jefferson, those types of guys that you could maybe get on the cheap, who you feel comfortable playing in the meantime. So ultimately, it's 20 minutes on Deebo Samuel to the Washington Commanders. Niners recoup a 5th-round pick. They're taking on $31 million in dead cap. They're not getting any cap savings, but I still think it's addition by subtraction in the sense that, it's probably time to move on, and it's what Deebo Samuel wanted. So to get a draft pick, a 5th-round pick, is positive. I thought they were just going to release him and not get anything in return but cap savings. But turns out they get a draft pick back. So I think the 49ers have 11 picks, and we will talk much more about it later on. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This is the Candlestick Chronicles podcast. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to be part of the conversation. Leave a comment. If you hate my takes, let me know. If you love my takes, let me know. Be part of the discourse, man. We love chatting Niner stuff. So subscribe to the YouTube channel. Again, like buttons, notification bells, all of those fun things. And we will talk to you guys later in the week. Kyle will be back to offer his takes. So hope everyone enjoys their weekend. See you later.